Welcome to the Puzzle of Us podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Peterson. Today we are having a little bit of a Halloween special today, and we are going to talk about the psychology of fear. And just as I was prepping for this, I just dove into kind of the history of Halloween. Why we celebrate Halloween, what's the purpose of it, other than a way to just, for commercial businesses to sell more candy and make money on costumes and all the things. But why do we really actually celebrate this? And it was a very interesting deep dive that I took. So I wanted to share some of the things that I learned with you on the podcast, and then we're going to talk about the psychology of fear that maybe tends to be a little more forefront on our minds as we celebrate the holiday season. Halloween started, it was a All Hallows Eve, or the Day of the Dead, as a way to really celebrate the dead or the deceased, the people who have passed on. In some cultures, there are people who would light candles at graves. If you've seen the movie Coco, this is the Day of the Dead. They light candles, they spend time at the grave. They basically have a big party in the graveyards as a way to celebrate ancestors who have passed on. And some people go to church and light candles or have vigils to just recognize and remember those who have passed on. And when you think about that, I mean, that's a fantastic thing, but what does that have to do with fear? And how did we go from there to creepy, ghouly things? So in the 19th century, people brought it across to America as America was getting started. And in about the 20th century, we start to see people in the Americas start to celebrate Halloween in kind of a commercialized way. And we think about remembering the dead and thinking about that. A lot of Halloween costumes or more traditional Halloween costumes are skeletons, are ghosts, are things that are kind of another world that maybe we don't understand. And this is where the psychology of fear kind of steps in a little bit, is, we don't understand the other side, the underworld, what happens to us after we die. We don't really know that, and because we don't know that, a lot of those unknown things can elicit fear. A lot of times fear is based in things that we don't understand or don't quite get the full picture, or logically it doesn't really make sense. And so Halloween has taken those things that are maybe fearful, we don't know, and kind of made them seem scary. All right, so what is fear? Fear is an emotional response to a perceived threat. So again, things that we don't understand, things that might seem a little bit unknown to us, things like skeletons, things like dead bodies, things like, not a lot of people spend a lot of time with dead bodies or even rotted bodies. And so skeletons become kind of a thing that is scary. Ghosts, if you believe in ghosts, or if you believe that there are spirits around us that communicate with us in some way, a lot of people have maybe scary experiences about them. Lots of movies sort of play on this thing, like Poltergeist, or there's The Ring. There's lots of things that, even The Sixth Sense, right? There's a lot of things that play on kind of ghosts or things that have been dead, that have been passed on, that we don't really understand. And so that's where that fear response becomes heightened or triggered during this Halloween time, and with all the ghosts and the ghouls. So there is a difference between healthy fear and protective fear, or irrational fear. Healthy fear is really there to protect us. It's there to keep us safe, right? Again, don't spend a lot of time with skeletons, and so when I see a real skeleton or something, it always kind of makes me pause and kind of think, like, ooh, like, how do I feel about this, right? And so the response that my body is having, and psychologically my fear response is triggered for good reason, of like, proceed with caution, and there's a good part of me that's also talking about, like, this is just a dead body, this is fine, we're okay. Most skeletons out there aren't real. At least I never actually interacted with a real live human skeleton. So probably not a lot of people have. But again, and then there's these irrational fears or phobias that really do get in the way. And so those fears tend to be heightened during this Halloween time, and can be a good thing for some people, or a exciting thing. As we get excited and our fear response goes up, we then get activated, and some people really enjoy that adrenaline rush and the response of fear that our body experiences. People sometimes seek that out. That's why haunted houses and things like that, where we go into them and we know that there's an end. We know that there's some safety and protection in that we are walking into, we are expecting to be scared, or our senses heightened. That's why a lot of times, things are dark. We go trick-or-treating or Halloween trick-or-treating, or we go to a haunted house and lots of things are dark, because that is causing our sight response to be impaired in some way, and one of our senses to be impaired. Oftentimes there's fog and stuff which can interfere with our body and even just how we're feeling the air, right? And so when those senses are dampened or disarmed in some way, or distracted in other things, that's oftentimes when people can get the most scared, right? If I'm looking over here, or I'm distracted by the twinkling lights or things like that, and then something unexpected jumps out, I'm gonna have a fear. My body will have a fear response, or a triggered response of whoa, there's something out to get me. And that's where fear kind of comes from. I just want to talk a little bit about the evolutionary origins of fear, and really kind of where it started for us as humans. And you can go all the way back to caveman days and things like that. But caveman days, we were really running from each other, running from maybe saber-toothed tigers, or as a way to really protect us, right? Lions, tigers, bears, right? We were prey to those predators, and our evolutionary history tells us that those things are scary and that we should run. And so that fear response was kind of came online in humans, and began to again give us that superior status over other mammals. And as we had this fight, flight, freeze response in our brain, we're able to decipher whether or not, or how we should respond. It is a very hardwired thing. Oftentimes, again, sometimes that's why people like being in control, or like being scared, and some people really don't like being scared, or going into haunted houses or things like that, because it is something that you can't really control. And some people really enjoy I like to just let myself go for a minute and let myself feel, and that's a way that they do it. And other people really don't like that feeling, because it's an out of control feeling. It's a chaotic feeling. I can't control, my body's response. Some people might even, in today's day and age, involuntarily pee their pants or things like that. Funny story with that. So my aunt, she used to own a corn maze, and my family, she would kind of hire us on the weekends and during Halloween to come and haunt the corn maze for her. And it was always really fun. I actually really loved being on the other part of it. And my dad particularly loved it. He still tells stories to this day of scaring people. And one day he was walking he had a whole bunch of, I think some USU football players had come to the corn maze, with all their cute little girlfriends and stuff. And my dad just talks about, these big burly guys that think they're all tough, and how when he was always the chainsaw guy. That's what he did. He wore a black gorilla mask, and my dad has kyphosis, which is a kind of a curvature in your back. Not scoliosis, his spine doesn't curve, but he kind of has a humpback kind of. And I'm probably making it sound worse than it is, but he has just a little hump right at the base of his neck, and so he really would kind of exaggerate that and kind of really slump over and wear his gorilla mask and kind of, wear all black clothes and kind of like walk like a gorilla, and then he'd pull this chainsaw. And he would always laugh when, these big, burly football players who think they're so tough would scream like girls. And his favorite story is one of them ended up like grabbing his girlfriend and like shoving her towards the chainsaw to get the chainsaw to go away, and not something would he typically do, and probably something he's, I hope, not very proud of. But his fear response was just like, how do I gotta put something in front of me, someone else. This is, you go get them. Another time he made a couple of, another group of tough guys come through, and one of them ended up actually like sitting in a corner peeing his pants because he was so scared. And, there's just, we aren't quite sure what our body is going to do all the time when that fear response is triggered. And some people really don't like that feeling, and other people really do enjoy that kind of adrenaline hit and that rush that comes. So again, a lot of things that kind of can trigger fear and anxieties, particularly around this time of year, but darkness, and particularly the unknown, right? Things that we are not familiar with. Heights is another thing that kind of is a common fear, and certain animals or kind of predators or things that we are unfamiliar with, people can elicit pretty good fears, because again, it goes back to that common factor of the unknown. I don't know this. I maybe don't spend a lot of time with tarantulas or spiders, or I don't spend a lot of time with rodents, and so they freak me out. Things like that. So snakes is often, reptiles and snakes and things that we don't understand or have a good understanding for, can definitely elicit those fear responses. Roles of phobias in our lives. Understanding phobias. That's the irrational fear part. Phobias get in a lot of people's way when they become too scared of certain things, when they become too scared of separation. Separation anxiety is a very real thing, and unfortunately for many kids, it is a very, very real thing. It can be really, really hard for many people, but particularly teenagers. Usually preteens, or as teenagers are kind of growing up and figuring out, okay, how do I want to be out in the world, and I want to be social, but it's scary. What if mom and dad, what if something happens to me? I'm not protected. Those kind of irrational fears sometimes can elicit social phobias, or even fear of separation. They definitely impact, normal life. Some people can have an irrational fear of animals, snakes, spiders, rodents, various animals like that. And some of them, phobias really, for it to be a phobia, when it is present, it really disrupts daily functioning. Why do we even have phobias in the first place? Sometimes we can sort of develop a phobia through kind of classical conditioning, right? Your classic, I was with a snake once and it bit me and it did harm to me, and so the next time I see a snake, I'm going to be scared, right? So there's that kind of classical conditioning. There can also be observational learning. If I am hiking with a partner and I don't necessarily have an interaction with a snake, but my partner does, it slithers through their feet or it bites them or things like that, I might also have that by observational learning. I can learn that, snakes might be scary or they might be a threat. And also, unfortunately, sometimes there are genetics and predispositions that we are just born with that create phobias in our lives, which is unfortunate. And all of those things can be worked through, and all of them can be overcome with help and consistency. So another kind of point I want to touch on is fear in the Halloween culture, and why fear it kind of plays such a big role in Halloween right now. So a lot of times, fear again can be a way of has kind of been commercialized, right? Some people like those that adrenaline rush, that feel of loss of control, that fear of the unknown that kind of pops out at them unexpectedly, or different ways that our fear center is kind of triggered. Halloween has essentially commercialized different ways to scare people, right? So we see that in horror films, and usually there's a horror film every year that one or two of them come out, and people go to the movies to get that scary feeling. Haunted houses, certainly, there's haunted houses all over right now that kind of again become commercialized in a way of eliciting fears in people. Even things like corn mazes and things like that, can elicit claustrophobia, and people will have to kind of work through those. And so those are just different ways. Fear can be used as an entertainment, and the commercial world of Halloween has very much capitalized on the entertainment value that fear can provide. People really, they do like to, especially when they can be scared in an environment that is somewhat controlled, right? Like when I go to a haunted house, I love being scared. My husband hates being scared, but I love being scared. And one of the reasons that I like it so much is that I don't particularly like being scared in an environment that I cannot control. But when I walk into a haunted house, or when I walk into a corn maze, or when I walk into something that is, I know, going to elicit some fear, I know that within a time it will stop, right? Whether I've made it to the end of the haunted house, whether I've made it out of the corn maze, I know that there's going to be an end to that. I also know that because of certain laws that have put in place, people aren't supposed to be able to touch me. People aren't, so that chainsaw, even though it's going, and even though I might scream initially, and I don't really love it, I know that I'm not going to be hurt by it. They aren't going to really cut me in half, things like that. They might get real close and they might try to elicit that fear, but it's again within a somewhat controlled environment. Whereas if someone was chasing me down the street on a random Friday in the middle of April, I am definitely going to be a lot more scared. So fear can definitely be an entertainment and a way to be sought after, particularly in this environment in this time of year. There are different cultures across the world that kind of view fear differently. There's things like zombies, spirit possession, monsters stealing souls from small children, ghosts haunting the living as kind of recompense for some wrongdoing. And there's all sorts of things that, people tell folk stories or folklores about, whether it's the haunted ghost, or whether it's the recompense. And a lot of these folk stories, or, the headless horseman or things like that, are really about, stories that tell this maybe deeper human experience of, sometimes the terror that it is to live in today's world, and the sometimes terrible things that we have to go through as humans to, kind of recognize ourselves and to learn lessons and experience life. And so, I think it's a good reminder, and certainly folklores and spooky ghost stories really tell tales of morality and what it's like to be really human. And I think, as scary as ghost stories can be, or folk stories or legends of that, of those sorts, they really can be all about what makes us human, and what it is to be human and live in this world. So as you hear the ghost stories and experience fear this holiday season, hopefully you can be reminded, or maybe even take a different lesson or a different look at it, because it certainly, there's a lot to be learned from those stories as well. Another thing that I just want to kind of touch on is the beauty that fear can do in bringing communities together, right? And we see lots of communities doing kind of trunk or treats or doing traditional Halloween, trick or treating door to door. And how fun it is to be able to, whether you do any of those, to visit with your neighbors and to celebrate together, whether it's really the Day of the Dead and remembering people who have passed on, or just a sense of, we're kind of all in this together, and where do I go for the best treats? And it's always funny, my kids, as we trick or treat, my kids always know, which house gives the best candy. And there's a few houses where we live that they know give soda pop and little cans of soda pop, and they give full-size candy bars versus the little miniature candy bars. And so it's kind of a fun way to bring together a community and really kind of get to know your neighbors, as well as, a way of kind of, okay, where am I going on Halloween? And this sense of community feeling that can really evolve from that can be really bonding and connecting for communities. And lots of people decorate, and there's whole streets. Right here in Logan, we have a whole street that every house is like decked out to the nines for Halloween. And again, that sense of community of like, if I'm going to live on the street, I'm going to commit to this, and we're going to be a part of it. And the camaraderie that can bring from it can really bring a sense of community and unity and excitement as well. Lots of people go trick-or-treating there, and they draw a crowd. So it can be a good thing. Really, ways, again, to cope with fears as you're experiencing them are always grounding techniques. And the more we can ground ourselves, we're going to have these emotional experiences. And when we get ungrounded or we get dysregulated, coming back to a grounded place, coming back to a central place, coming back to a wiser other, whatever resonates with you. But if you can come back to this place of calm regulation, those can be the best tips for kind of helping regulate fear at any time of the year, but particularly when maybe something jumps out at you this Halloween. It's a good chance to practice your grounding techniques. Mindfulness practices, again, as you go in, doing some mindful exercises, even maybe imagining yourself being fearful and then being able to calm yourself back down can be really helpful. Also, cognitive reframing that you're doing is, I know that this is only for a short time. I know that this isn't real. I know that I'm going to be safe. I know this isn't going to actually hurt me. As you can tell yourself that, that fear response gets ignited, and that reframe can also happen, can be really great ways to help cope with your fear during this Halloween season. Again, sometimes fears get triggered, and they trigger something deeper inside of us that maybe needs some help and get worked through. And if this happens to you, whether or not this during this Halloween season or during any season of the year, there is always professional help out there. And there's no thing that is too little to seek counseling or seek professional help. We are here to help, and we really do want to help. So again, as you kind of think back through fear and Halloween and what triggers you have and what fears and phobias you might have, or just fears in general, learning how to kind of sit with the discomfort and also be able to get back to regulation can be a really helpful thing. Thinking about, how am I going to help my kids learn to manage these things? Do I enjoy going to the scare house or not? And why? Just kind of learning that about yourself and giving yourself grace, always giving yourself grace, whether or not you like it or not, is a really great thing. So thanks for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed this little tidbit Halloween special on the psychology of fear, and hopefully you can find yourself maybe being even a little more patient with yourself this Halloween season when you feel that fear get triggered just a little bit. Thanks for listening. I've been your host, Chelsea Peterson. We'll catch you next time.